I am DM Zone. This is Gamers Oasis. Let's get into it. In this video, I'm going to talk about the spell Protection from Normal Missile. It is referred to as a charm, and I'm going to get into what that exactly means by the end of this video. Specifically, it says in this spell that the recipient of this charm becomes impervious to normal missiles. It continues to say that this implies that those normal missiles projected by not above normal men and or weapons. So what do we take away from that? Well, we have to go all the way back to fighting capability in the 1974 rules and in the chainmail rules, which actually comes from a war game that the game was based off of that was partially made by Gary Gygax. In these rules, it talks about a fighter or a cleric or whatever will fight as a man or a man plus one or two men or several men and this type of thing. I think that because the spell uses the word men, the plural of man, not the singular, that this goes all the way up to 3 men. When you get to 4 man though, you start to enter a new realm. For example, in chainmail and in fighting capability, both, you have heroes, lords, and wizards. And these are more than 3 men. A hero is 4 men, a lord and wizard are 8 men. And I think this is the distinction between what they consider a normal missile and those fired from a above normal man. Where does this come from? Well, this comes from the fantasy combat system found in chainmail. And this is the chainmail component to this. And in there, I would be comparing the man-to-man combat system, which I have a whole video talking about this thing, as if it was a normal arrow being fired from a man towards a person. This would be part of the man-to-man combat system. However, if it was targeting a chimera instead of a man, then you'd have to be using the fantasy combat system, which is the other half of this. And if 3 normal men or less fire an arrow at a chimera, then nothing happens. It requires that 4th man. It requires that hero status or lord status, aka 8 men, or wizard status to be able to fire at a chimera. Now, there are some discrepancies, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. So it also talks about weapons. Now, I think this is also answered in the fantasy chart. For example, if you were to have a magical weapon, then that is going to bypass the normal man-to-man rules and go directly into the fantasy chart because magic weapons are on the fantasy chart. Now, an elf using a longsword also is on the fantasy chart. Now, it also talks about elves and bows. I wonder if that type of thing would also be there. I think that's more of a referee discretion. Somewhere between probably elves and 4 men that are normal with a longbow or whatever, firing at a fantasy creature or someone with protection from normal missiles, and probably all the way out towards a giant, which probably would bypass because that weapon is not normal, it's above normal. Probably is where that line would be. However, while I don't think the player needs to know at first, I think the referee needs to have this solid and basically know how this would last. The rest of the detailed information on this is that the spell lasts for 12 turns. I assume this to be not combat turns, but actual 10-minute rounds, say, as what you would find in the original Dungeons & Dragons. If it is that, then that makes it great for exploring dungeons. Also, being a 3rd level spell, I think it's important for this thing to have that kind of power. It can be cast on a target up to 30 feet away or 3 inches on the sand table. And the word charm feels like sort of a replacement for the use of the word enchantment, which is more of a modernized term. So it looks like even back then the concept of enchantment was there. It just wasn't necessarily being fully incorporated in the vocabulary yet. Anyways, guys, what did I miss? Did I get this one right? Did I get this one wrong? Let me know down in the comments down below what you think. Have a great day and keep rolling those dice. Bye.